Well, this is wonderful being here. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to come here to be in this space. I have met some wonderful women over the course of the last couple days. I had a wonderful woman this morning who did my reflexology, and she told me, first of all, I never knew that you could feel that when she's just touching you. So my husband now knows that he could just touch my feet and it'll do something. But I said, I've always had feet issues. And she said, well, what is your sign? And I said, Pisces. She said, do you know that you really should have flippers? So I'm taking my shoes off because Pisces don't belong in shoes. And those of you who are Pisces, do you like to take your shoes off? Yes, so celebrate your sign. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to start off, I wouldn't be able to begin this without thanking the same people who we've all thanked. I have a funny story about my first time I met Marilyn. I was in ERDI at a conference, and Marilyn held the room because she is a big deal. It's no surprise, Marilyn, that your company is Big Deal Media because you really are a force and a power to reckon with, and I really am grateful that you became part of my life. But she scares me a little bit because you can throw a mean hatchet, you told us. So she is a big deal. So thank you so much, Marilyn, for allowing me to be part of this community of great, wonderful women. Kathy, thank you for your support. And to Angela, my fearless leader in Stages Learning. And to all my new friends here. So thank you so much. So before we begin about talking about how we can meet the needs of our most vulnerable population, the only thing I want to talk about was I didn't find out until last night what a cell phone bed was. There is this thing sitting right by my TV, and it's this little wooden box, and it has this funny jagged sign on it. I swear this is the truth. I did not know if I could put my jewelry on it, because I didn't know if it was like some voodoo type thing. But it's a cell phone bed. It was awesome. I love it. I'm learning a lot about how to take care of myself. So we're going to go through an emotional journey together as I share the story about what we're going through today as leaders and how, in order for us to help take care of our most neediest population, our special education students, we have to start by ourselves. We have to reclaim our why and go back to our purpose that put us in this chair in the first place. Because I think oftentimes we forget about that. So far, one of my most favorite parts of this journey was every time I went to go get a service and I was sitting in the quiet room, I watched all of you laying there waiting for your name to be called. And when your name was called, every single one of you stood up and smiled so brightly, and you were so excited. So from the moment we stepped here to the moment we leave, you are starting to reclaim who you are as an individual, to give yourselves that energy to go back and take on the challenges that we have, because it's not easy. And so your face watching you brought me joy. Brittany, you said this earlier. It starts with us. It starts with the people in this room. We all have the same belief for our children, that regardless of where our children come from, who they are, their race, their background, whomever they are, we are the ones that make a difference. And we all believe that every child deserves the very best. I'm so grateful for Barack Obama, when he reauthorized the ESEA Act, that he put this in there. This is our job, this is our mission, it starts with us. Never underestimate ourselves and who we are and our students that we serve. But there's challenges that we're all facing, and I've heard lots of us share this. But take a minute to think about this. So the recruitment and retainment of our teachers. Angela and I had an opportunity to go around to all the tables yesterday and share who we are as Stages Learning. We shared some statistics. The rise of autism cases are on the rise. 1970, there was 1 in 10,000 students were diagnosed with autism. Now in 2022, that's 1 in 54. We've had a 178% increase since 2000 to today in autism diagnoses. With those diagnoses and the lack of teacher retainment and recruiting, how can we do our jobs? How can we serve the most neediest population? Research also talks about having the right number of therapists in our classroom. the trained ABA professionals to work with our specialized students. Those numbers are decreasing. They say 1 in 100. For every 100 students you have that require significant support, you should have one trained therapist. Majority of states don't have that. So we're in a deficit. There's a high incidence of burnout and stress. I think we all feel that. We know that. We've shared that. But how do we stay true to ourselves amidst all of these challenges? We're faced with students with the regression of skills. We're faced with the decrease in student attendance. Think about those last 2 years and where we were as districts and the number of kids that were not showing up. Despite what we did, beyond giving everybody Wi-Fi access, beyond giving everybody Chromebooks, we did everything we could in our power to bring the kids to us and to bring the teachers into their homes, but we still had kids that weren't there. Forget about the fact that we had to provide and implement IEPs in a pandemic. Thank goodness they turned to telehealth therapy and gave districts permissions to do that. But now some of us in this room, I've heard people talk, are facing legal issues with those families who don't believe that their students or their child receive the necessary supports. So now we're going into the you didn't do this for my child. Equity of access. When I talk about equity of access, I talk about access to curriculum, access that kids need. Enough is enough with special education teachers needing to go down the hall and borrow textbooks from their gen ed. That's how we do it, that we buy a new program, everybody gets it, and the special ed teachers borrow. And we saw that a lot during the pandemic. Now is the time to make sure that when we're building our budgets, we're telling our narrative that every child is included. In the last 2 years, you weren't leading. It was maintenance. It was triage. You never knew what you were going to get when you woke up that morning. So what we need to do, and I'm asking all of us to do, is to take a step back and think about who we are as individuals and why we're here. I often ask these questions to our teachers, but how do we do this and remember who we are if this is all we see? I'm not going to read these, but this is what's in the papers today. So how can we be there for everybody if we can't be there for ourselves? And currently, the statistics are stacked against us. With teachers leaving, mostly teachers with special education degrees are leaving, they're tired, and they need something else to fuel them. Don't even get me started on the bus drivers. I mean, the amount of stress that we went through knowing how can we get the children in the seats if we don't have the drivers to get the kids there? A colleague of mine, Michelle, that works for Stages Learning, recommended this book for me. And I don't read a lot right now because I'm in the middle of finishing up my dissertation, my doctorate. And the joy for reading for me is not a pleasure at this moment. But if you read that, we are all guilty in this room of the human giver syndrome. We want to give everything that we have to everybody else because we feel like that's our job and that we have to do everything. Some of us in this room are not only educators, leaders, your friends, your partners, your spouses, your sisters, your siblings, your aunts. Some of you may be grandparents. We have to give to everybody else before we stop and think about ourselves. But I want you to stop for a minute and think about you're something larger. So I'm going to walk you through a little personal journey of mine. And I want you to think about this as I tell my story, because you're going to share yours at your table. And I want you to stop and I want you to reclaim who you are and why you're here and what value you bring to yourself. That's me, if you can't tell right there. This is my mom, Inga, in the middle. my sister Kimmy, my brother Joseph. I'm going to try not to cry because it's personal, but May 23rd, 1979, my world changed. The woman in the middle left. What's that? I know. Thank you, Brittany. So I was in second grade, and I was in my second grade classroom, and I got called to go to the office. And my teacher, it's funny, when you lose a parent at age 8, it's funny the things that you remember. You don't remember a lot, but I remember this day like it was yesterday. She pulls me to her desk, she puts her arm around me, she says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to get my shoes for my first Holy Communion." Because my Holy Communion was like 3 days later. So I expected to go downstairs and see my mom in the office. We grew up in a very small town, about 1,000 people. We just got a traffic light, maybe 20 years ago. And everybody knew my mom. My mom was the Red Cross lifeguard for individuals with disabilities, Down syndrome in my community. I spent my whole childhood going to the pool with my mother, teaching Down syndrome adults how to swim, which is probably why I took up swimming and swam as my sport. But I remember that. My father owned a financial business in town, and he owned the only cable company. It was a walking district. Everybody knew my mom. So I go downstairs to get picked up by my mom, and I see Mr. Stevens, who's the town police. And everybody in the office is crying. I have no idea what's going on. No one's talking to me. And I go out to the cop car, and my sister's in the front seat. And I said, I remember, "Kimmy, what did you do?" And she's like, "And what did you do?" And we just sat there, and Mr. Stevens cried the entire time until he got home. And I walked in the door, and I remember seeing my grandmother, who was out of control, and my father on the phone crying. And my 5-year-old brother, Joseph, said, "Mom's dead." You don't really understand what that means, and you kind of you forget about certain memories. But I would like you guys to guess who this just might be. Can anybody guess who this woman may be in my life? Nope. That is Mrs. Shea, my second grade teacher. I know, I couldn't believe I found a picture of her. She was the woman that hugged me that day. She made it her journey that from the rest of that school year in May to the end of June, every single day she walked me outside and told me how wonderful my mother was. Told me what she did for the community, told me how much my dad loved her. That's why I became a teacher. So, funny story. She loved Gerald Waltrip, the race car driver, and she loved Mountain Dew. We used to always go see Daryl race, and she would bring her, back in the days when you could actually put your students in the car and drive, she did. But she was amazing, and I ran into her at a restaurant when I was a teacher, and I told her, "I am a teacher because of you. You are my why. You are my something larger. You are my purpose." So, I would like each of you, on your tables, you have this card, and this card will come into play later. I want you to think about take a few minutes to talk about your why. What is your purpose? How old were you when you knew that you wanted to get into the field of education? Who was your something larger? What was your something larger? And does it still feed you energy? So take a few minutes and talk about that with your table and yourself and reflect. Who was your Mrs. Shea? So I'm wondering if anybody is brave enough to stand up and share your story and share who your something larger is, who feeds you the energy to wake up every day and continue to do the work that you do, because it's not easy. Does anybody want to share? And it's okay if you cry, because I did. This is what leaders do. We lead by example. Yes?
So I was hearing impaired. I had a big box, which really kind of screamed deaf kid, before the Miracle era. This was a long time ago, before IDEA. And in first grade, my parents were advocates before the laws, and they
Excellent.
But it's amazing that this woman had a way of understanding that I wanted to seem normal, and and my parents, their mantra was never let your disability become your inability. So I had to work harder, try harder, get better grades, because I was a deaf child without all of the special services, because that would have meant, similar to a speaker earlier, that you go into a specialized classroom. So when you talked about your mother, I was that person, right? Because it was before IDEA 1975. However, that's not what makes Mrs. Bella Flores my favorite teacher, that she was so amazing. What made her special was two other reasons. She went to my high school graduation, my bachelor's, my 2 masters, and my doctorate. And even that wasn't what made her my favorite. I had a dog. I love pets. And my dog would walk to school, Little Keensville, Texas, rural community. That dog, Mannix, a little mutt, would go with me to school. She let that dog go into the classroom, sit next to her desk every day, and we got a perfect attendance award. I always tell my teachers, be the Bella Flores, be that person that 50 years later somebody is talking about how amazing you made them feel.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm sure everybody had wonderful stories and brought you to that place that you remember. And I have something I want to share with you. And I want all of us to remember that you are here because you felt compelled to serve and to make others feel the way that you felt by that somebody in your life or that movement that happened to you. So when you leave here and you go back to that place where everybody demands your attention, your focus, your time, your energy, unfortunately, board members and boards of education have forgot about our purpose, and that is to serve students. And so when you're sitting there and the comments are being thrown at you, I want you to remember who you are, and I want you to continue to reclaim your identity and your something larger. And so on that postcard there, that is a verse to the song I'm going to play. And I want you to watch this video. This was a part of The Greatest Showman, and the woman, when they were singing this during rehearsal, had no idea that she was being filmed. And I want you to watch her body from the beginning into where she is at the end. And I want you to feel her energy, and I want you to bring that with you, and remember that you are amazing.